Welcome everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I hope you're able to join me today. We haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks, but it's been kind of quiet. But I think right now is a great time to jump in. There's a lot of stuff breaking today relative and that could affect Arkansas Razorbacks basketball. I think the biggest story that came out from CBS Sports, John Rothstein, earlier today, that Ron Holland, the Texas signee, has been, that we know that he requested, Ron Holland did, a release from his national letter of intent back on April 28th. That's last month. Here we are nearing the end of May. And Rothstein's reporting that Texas has, in fact, released Ron Holland from his letter of intent. But we've got a little bit different take on this right now. And I'm hearing, while it may be just a formality, and maybe Texas has informed Ron Holland that they intend to do that and putting that ball in motion, it may very well be that for whatever reasons, it's not technically or formally been consummated yet. What that means precisely, I don't know. There may be up to a 72-hour window once the ball actually starts rolling on the release itself, where it becomes official. Up to meaning maybe sooner than that. So I just don't know how it's going to land, but I don't think the reporting, from what I'm understanding and what I'm told right now, is exactly pristine. The ball's rolling toward granting the release. I don't think, in fact, as we're on live right now at this moment, I don't think, in fact, that has been fully consummated yet. Why does that matter? Because whatever Ron Holland decides to do on a college level, if he intends to transfer, or not transfer, but intends to sign with another school, enroll at another school eventually, that release must be fully consummated. You know, the other part of the reporting today by John Rothstein was that Ron Holland was also visiting the G League Ignite in Las Vegas. That's where that team is based out of. And while that may be true, whether it's today, tomorrow, this is something Ron Holland could have done at any time. He could have announced even before. He doesn't need a letter of intent release to go pro. And that's what the G League Ignite is. It's a pro option. The National Basketball League, I was told that was an opportunity that was going to pursue Ron Holland over in Australia. Some players coming straight out of high school in the United States have gone down that path before going in the NBA draft a year later. But visiting the Ignite could have been something he had done at any point. It could be today, it could be tomorrow. It's not incumbent upon a release from a letter of intent, nor were visits to other schools. He could have been doing that once he made his formal request for release from that letter of intent. I'm told that was again back on April 28th, nearly a month ago. As far as I know, he hasn't taken any visits. I've had a couple of sources that thought he may take visits to schools. One was very specific with me a week or so ago, and I put this over on HogvilleNET in my reporting in the transfer portal thread and the Ron Holland threads over there, that there were a couple of schools specifically. I didn't name them, but I was told he might visit. Today I was told that he's considering visits, and it could be as many as 4 or 5. This is not coming directly from Ron Holland's family, so I want to make that clear. However, I remain skeptical about visits at this point because it's something he could have done. So even if he's considering it, I don't know that I believe that he'll end up taking them. Maybe he will. High school graduation for everybody's coming into play also the next week or so. And so, let's see if he decides to take visits to other schools once his letter of intent release is fully consummated. But again, we're at HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Thank you for joining me. Once again, I want to reiterate the reporting today, and a lot of people ran with it. There's a lot of people clickbait. They want to drive, clicks to their articles, and the articles are really regurgitating what one person started the day off with, John Rothstein, reporting that the release had been consummated, or he didn't use the word consummated, but that it took effect or had been granted. So it could just be semantics at this point, because my understanding is, yes, it's going to happen. The release is going to happen, but it may not have, the formality of the completion of that release has not been fully consummated at the time that I came on just 5 minutes ago. So I guess that can be updated or changed and become a reality at any moment. But as of now, and it may sound like, just kind of mincing words, and splitting hairs, but it matters, because until the full release is granted, and whatever the NCAA has to do to sign off on it or clear it or whatever, until that happens, a potential Ron Holland decision to do anything else on the college level, not taking visits, that he could do, but in terms of making decisions and being fully released to do that, fully free to do it, my understanding is, as I do this now, that hasn't happened yet. So we'll see how that plays out. I thought that was important to come on and talk about today. We don't do clickbait over at Hogville, and we certainly don't want to get it right. And things are fluid and things change quickly. That's why I preface everything. But that's why I put a question mark with my tweet today, talking about doing this YouTube live behind just about all the little bullet points I was going to talk about, because I think there's a lot of question marks still out there. So we're talking about Ron Holland. We know Arkansas, by the way, has 2 open scholarships. So there was some other news today as well related to the Razorbacks. Trayman Mark, the junior transfer from Houston, committed to Arkansas, back in April. So that April 3rd through 17, 2-week window when Arkansas picked up those 5 portal commits, Trayman Mark, who, CBS Sports says they ranked him 5th among all the portal transfers in terms of how they ranked him, which is a big deal. A recent one that came out, rankings for portal prospects, he was in the top 25. So this is one of the top transfers out there. Today he announces that he's formally withdrawing from the NBA draft. This should come as no shock. This was expected. He had been in the draft, had already entered in that. He was in the portal. He committed to Arkansas. He wasn't invited to the G League elite camp that was a predecessor. Weekend before last, leading up to the NBA draft combine, was not invited to that. And this was really expected because, not only was he in the portal, but he'd already committed to Arkansas. So you felt like this is where it was headed. I think L. Ellis will be the next one out of the 5. Obviously, the next one he'll be the last as well to announce at some point, whether that's later today or some in the next few days. He has until May 31st. So, effectively 8 more days. That's the deadline to get out of the NBA draft to go if you're going to return to college. But we know out of the 6'3" guard out of Louisville committed to Arkansas back in April, and I fully expect any day now he'll announce that he's withdrawn from the draft. So that's one more. We're going to give, we've been talking a lot on Pig Trail Nation on Sunday. I kind of gave another Divo update. I've been saying for a while that Devonte Davis, I felt like before, and I said for a while, that he may just go ahead and go pro even if he's not going to be drafted. In recent weeks, I have shifted that thinking, even hung a percentage in the early going, see how things kind of went. That it looked like at this point, more likely that it would return to Arkansas. As each day has gone by, I've become more and more convinced that's the case. I said on Pig Trail Nation segment on Sunday that I fully believe at this point, by that May 31st deadline, we're going to hear that Devo Davis is withdrawn from the draft and returning to Arkansas. I mentioned that I believe he'll have, I think he's going to have an opportunity with a pro team just in terms of a workout meeting. So that's, remains to be seen to play out. I'm not going to say who it is, but I think once that happens, I think by that May 31st deadline, the most likely scenario is that he's going to return and be an Arkansas Razorback. And also, I kind of hinted to a Hog a few weeks ago that's in this draft entry process that was going to get a workout later. So that's who I was hinting about for those who remember that. So I'm saying a little bit more now, but I'm not going to say any more on it. And let's see if it happens. And so some of that stuff may come out pretty quickly with more specifics. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to give him a chance to do that if he wants and when he wants and how he wants. But I do think Devo Davis ends up coming back for year 4 under Eric Musselman. I said this on Pig Trail Nation. We don't know. That's uncharted waters. A 4-year player under Eric Musselman at Arkansas. He was at Nevada for 4 years. I have to go back and look and see how all that shook out. And did they have a guy that was there 4 years under him? But at Arkansas, that would be a first. And it would also bring Arkansas to having 1 open scholarship. I've said the numbers. They're with 2 openings as of now. I think Devo gets one of those. We've talked about Ron Holland. I'm going to jump back to that just for a minute because I failed to mention, I've been saying for a long time on these various, YouTube lives, podcasts, Zooms, on the radio, in my writing on Hogville, that I love. I've used the word love Arkansas's chances to get him. That hasn't changed. Whether he's visiting the Ignite, if he ends up taking visits to other schools, we'll see. Like I said, I'm skeptical about some of that, but we'll see if it does play out that way, because I've got good sources that think he just very, very well may do that. But I still love Arkansas's chances. I haven't downgraded that or shifted away from it. So that could be how your 2 scholarship openings play out. We'll see. But then there's other things at play. Jordan Walsh, I've been saying for the longest time, before he ever made an announcement, I told you he was going to be testing the draft waters, and then he announced it. We talked about that a lot. And then I've always said that I think once he's in, he's more than likely to stay in. I still believe that right now, but here's the thing. He's a guy that's going to project, his sweet spot's really mid-second round. And so when I hear that and when I see that, even though the combine, we're going to talk a little bit about that too, I thought in many ways, he helped himself. I thought he helped himself greatly by doing the measurements and those things that we knew he would stand out in once he did them. And then the shooting drills, I thought, were really good for him, so that helped him. But when I say it helped him greatly, it's relative to maybe where he was viewed before the combine, but not necessarily stacking up against other guys that maybe moved ahead of him based on their performances or in dead heat with him. And so I know that there are some NBA teams out there when I hear about the big boards, he's not in their top 60. There's only 58 picks in this draft, but we all know that can be the case. And all it takes is one team to give you a draft guarantee with a guarantee contract, guaranteed terms, for that to be just enough to stay in. And so those are the kind of things that Jordan Walsh is going to have to sift through. I do think he helped himself, but I don't know how much that moves the needle in terms of where he would get drafted, where other guys were in that same range as him that might move ahead. And is there a possibility he goes undrafted? And all those things can be determined behind the scenes with just one team that says, stay in, we're going to get you. And so those are the things that are going to be very interesting, because he left the door open for a return. Arkansas would welcome him back if that was the decision. And even though I still think he probably stays in, I could change on that based on more information that comes in. And I think there's a possibility on a couple of things. If he doesn't get the kind of guarantee that he feels certain that he'll be drafted, that could sway him. The other thing is, if he has set a goal or a marker for what he needs, and whatever he's being told will be done for him doesn't measure up to that, he could come back. Again, right now, I still believe he likely stays in, but that window's closing. And so I may change on that within minutes or hours based on more information that I get. So it's kind of like, it almost sounds like mixed messaging. He helped himself, but I'm not sure how much. But all it takes is one or two teams, and that's what I'm not sure about. I've known more about previous Hogs in the last 3 drafts where they went early second to mid-second round. I had a better understanding and knowledge of exactly what they were going to get if they stayed in. I'm not as clear on that with Jordan Walsh right now, and I hope to become more so. But we're running out of time for the deadline. We'll see when and if. We'll see when he makes a final decision on staying there or coming back. But my feeling right now is, again, I'm just repeating it, more than likely to stay in, but we'll see. That could shift. So it's very interesting. Going back to the combine, I thought Anthony Black did, all he did for himself was a big service. He went through the measurables. I mean, this is a big lead guard. He was going to blow that out of the water relative to other point guards that are in the draft. Size, weight, reach, standing reach. His wingspan's not elite, but when you're already 6'7", it's really good. And so he ranked really well when you start putting up the measurables. And then when you look at his agility, his max vertical lead, 6th out of all that tested. That's elite. We knew he was athletic. He was number 1 among the Razorbacks that went through agility testing. And so some of you might be surprised that it was better than Ricky Council IV. Either way, I think the smart thing was for him to go through those and test those things. He did it. I think the smart thing was for him to not do shooting drills. That's not his strength. Or to do the 5-on-5, which, by the way, 35 or so players, 37 players that are projected either first round or close to it with a shot at getting in there, they all opted not to play in that 5-on-5. That's been the trend of late. And it's why in the collective bargaining agreement that takes effect next year, They've got it worked out where if you're going to the combine, you're going to hurt. You may not be eligible for the draft if you don't go through and participate all the stuff. And so we'll see how that gets. I need to learn more about that, but that's what I'm told. But this year it didn't matter. And so smart for him not to do it. Same with Nick Smith Jr. He's represented by Clutch Sports. Clutch has 4 players that it's representing that are expected to be drafted somewhere, could be drafted somewhere. 3 of those are all mocked first round. And so none of their first round guys did measurements, agility testing, shooting drills, or 5-on-5. They all did interviews. So I think, when people ask him, why didn't Nick Smith Jr. do that stuff? Well, that's the strategy his agency has in place, which, by the way, is arguably the most powerful agency out there. Maybe has the most sway. There will be a pro day that Clutch has this week. Nick Smith Jr. will take part in that. By the way, pro day today for Anthony Black's agency. That's going on today in Santa Barbara. He's taking part in that. As is, this agency also represents Grant Nelson. So let's jump to Grant because this is a good segue. Grant Nelson, North Dakota State junior transfer, jumped in the portal, not that long ago. And he'd been in the NBA draft. He's been entered in that draft pool, went to the combine, going through pro day today, like I said. So he's got options that he's got to make a decision by May 31st. We'll see what he ends up deciding. He has been focused solely on this draft process. Another thing I've been reporting on in Hogville, in our transfer portal, that whatever million-page thread now, I've been talking about the fact that he would solely focus on this and likely not to take visits. That's how it's played out. However, if he chooses to come back and makes that decision, whenever that is in the next few days by the 31st, if that decision is to return to college, I like Arkansas's chances jumping into play here. I really do. I think Arkansas is going to be a player for this guy. And then it's just a matter of how many visits does he take? Where does he go visit? How much longer does that take? So I say all that. I've kind of gone through all of this to say when you're staring at that May 31st deadline and you're thinking, okay, we're going to know everything by then, not necessarily, because just because you make a decision to stay or go, if you're coming back, you may take visits if you're in the portal, and that may take some more time. Going back to Ron Holland, he's not impacted by that deadline. He's been waiting on this release. He requested on April 28th. Texas has 30 days to grant it, or then at that point, Holland can then petition the NCAA, and that can become a process. Could it be treated as just a formality by the NCAA if it came to that? Well, we're hearing now that it's probably not going to come to that. Again, reporting today that he's been released. What I'm hearing is the wheels are in motion on that, but maybe technically it hasn't been fully consummated, and that matters. But still, it looks like if the ball's rolling on it, it's likely to be resolved before that 30-day window closed, and there won't be a need to petition the NCAA. But we're going to keep an eye on it because we don't know exactly until we know it's finalized. It's still a little bit in limbo. It sounds like progress, but I don't think it's the full progress that was reported earlier. And I'm not going to, if there's there's some misunderstanding here on some of this, we'll clean it up later. But from what I'm told, and I was careful about this, when I'm reporting when I came on is where it stood at the time I came on. How quickly that changes, it could have been resolved while I'm on here. I don't know that. It may take a day or more. Don't know. So let's see how that plays out. But I think it's all very interesting because at this time of year, in previous years, as good a job as Eric Melsman has done recruiting, there haven't been this many question marks about the roster and all the different moving parts with the NBA draft, transfer portal, and now a guy that's getting out of a letter of intent that Arkansas basically finished second on when he ended up committing and signing with Texas all the way back in the fall. So there's a lot of moving pieces, 2 open roster spots, and guess what? Players that are committed and are returning players, all these different things, all these guys are coming back this weekend, Memorial Day weekend, this upcoming weekend is always, every year, it's when players start moving on to campus. The first session of summer school starts the following week. They'll go through physicals, and then at some point soon, you'll have that limited practice that the NCAA allows for, it's typically 4 hours a week for on-court work. So all these things start to unfold starting this weekend, and I've just went through all the stuff that's still lingering, not only going to May 31st, which is just beyond Memorial Day weekend with that get out of the draft or go to college, get out of the draft to go back to college or stay in the draft decision time. That's even after the weekend. but then a couple of things can play out a little bit even longer than that. And so it's very interesting. This is uncharted water at Arkansas this time of year, for these kind of things. Now, we've seen players move on and things happen after, even later. But this many irons on the fire, and really high level guys at that. Usually when you have patchwork later on, you're usually not talking about a 5-star player that's ranked the #1 player in the country that you're still waiting to see how that falls. Or Grant Nelson, who, is arguably a top 5 portal guy. If he does come back to college, he's highly coveted. You could argue he's the top portal guy. There's a case there. So you got 2 guys that Arkansas in play for, in my opinion. It should be obvious by now. So there's not only are they question marks that seem so late, but they're question marks that matter to everybody, because that gives Arkansas extra national traction. I mean, how about this draft combine? Eric Musselman knocked it out of the park with his interview on ESPN2, with 4 Razorbacks taking part in the combine. That was the most of any school in the country, tied for the most with one other school. So, you're getting a lot of, there's a lot of branding. It's great collateral material. And then you had Anthony Black doing interviews with ESPN2. He did that before when he made his announcement that he was going to go in, that he was going to go pro. And now he's back on ESPN. So that Arkansas brand continues to be elevated with these opportunities. But now that the combine's over, the draft's in June, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to shake out, because we just went through a lot of it. But I think, again, if you're Arkansas, you're checking boxes. Devo Davis, I believe he's returning. That's huge. This is one of the greatest Razorbacks ever when you put it all together, including postseason where he's been at his best, and really made the difference between, going home or winning and advancing. And here's a guy that's a program guy. He understands what Musselman wants. You've just brought in and had a commitment haul of 5 players in that 2-week span in April. They're all backcourt guys. It's all perimeter, because the guys that are staying in the draft are perimeter guys. And so that have left your program. So you had to replace that. But now you got a guy that can come back, communicate what's expected, do it by example, and be like a second coach on the floor. I think that'll be huge for Arkansas. I don't want to get ahead of myself. It sounds like I'm making Devo's announcement for him. Let's see how it plays out. But I believe now more than ever that's what's going to happen. Let's see how it plays out. But you do that, and you get a Ron Holland and/or Grant Nelson. Let's see what happens with Jordan Walsh. You get Jordan Walsh back. He was a 5-star coming in. It's a 5-star win if he comes back. I put that on Devo Davis. That's a 5-star recruiting win. That's retention. Ron Holland's the #1 player in the country, obviously a 5-star. Grant Nelson's a 5-star player when you're talking portal. So it's nothing but 5 stars that we're talking about how things could finish for Arkansas at this point. And so, if there's any other thing that lands, believe me, there are other contentions and contingencies for how things could land and might land. And so we pay attention to that as well. But those are the names I'm going to talk about now that I can specifically talk about. And I think it's very interesting because when I see all these, way too early top 25s, you'll see a lot of them either include Devo. Some of them are still including Jordan Walsh. But either way, with how this is going to shake out, I do think Arkansas is looking at another preseason top 10, if not top 5. When you look at Joe Lunardi's ESPN bracketology, way too early projections, he's kind of oscillated recently, had Arkansas as a 2 seed, recently slipped it to 3. But either way, all of these things look like another top 10-ish projection. And if these things land just right, we're going to be talking about preseason 1 through 5, national championship talk, Final Four talk, which is how the conversation was really looking last year when we started. The reason Arkansas didn't go preseason top 10, and it was top 5, and it was rather top 10, when you looked at the national guys, was because of all the newcomers, 11, and 6 of those were freshmen. So even though the recruiting rankings were stellar, it was still a lot. This team's replacing a lot as well, but Trevin Brazil's coming back. I didn't even mention him in this because we're talking about stuff that's about to happen. But with a player like that, and with these veteran guys, all these newcomers now, there's more of a veteran feel to that. Guys that have a lot of college experience and less so many newcomers that are also coming straight out of high school. So there's different reasons to think the conversation could be even better this time with the national pundits when we start talking about how Arkansas could finish here. And then you're talking top 5 preseason rankings potentially and being bantied about as a national title contender coming into it, more so on a national level. We were certainly doing that locally here last year because we felt like we understood what Arkansas was getting. And, certainly the injuries played a big part in how things changed on that. Arkansas finishes strong with that Sweet 16. But again, I think Arkansas is heading in spectacular fashion, for another preseason where the expectations are going to be really high. And there's really a potential, in my opinion, if this lands just right, for Arkansas to based on some of those reasons I just gave, to maybe not have as many stumbles, even early in conference play, which has always been the case under Eric Musselman, even in back-to-back Elite Eight seasons. So I think we've covered most of it. I saw some comments coming on. HogvilleNET YouTube Live, thank you for joining me. Go over to hogville.net for content. We love doing these. We do them all year long through the season, after games, post-game. We did some pre-games. We've been doing follow-up stuff through the spring when there's been, breaking news on commitments or other things. So we're not doing them daily. And we're not looking for a reason to come on here just to get you to click. We want to give you value and bring information that's useful to you. And again, what we tell you today might be a little bit different even in a few minutes. And so we're pushing 30 minutes here, about 27 minutes in. Just to recap, I do believe Ron Holland is now on a path for his full release from Texas. But when I came on, it was not fully consummated. How many empty seats on our bench? Well, I hope I answered that. Arkansas's got 2 openings technically right now. I think Devonte Davis is, unless something changes or there's something else going on there, that he's going to be back. I do believe that. And, whether it's Ron Holland and or Grant Nelson or someone else who Arkansas's got some other stuff going on here. So there's more than 2 or 3 ways this could land. Jordan Wallace, I mentioned him. Although I do believe, as I say it now, that he's more likely to stay in. And I want to say a few things about him, what I saw at the combine in his 5-on-5 play. I thought he did some really good things. He dove after 50-50 balls, won those battles, and then he made a play out of them, pass ahead for an easy score. These were things Jalen Williams did last year in his scrimmage work. We saw him do it at Arkansas, but he had all those eyes on him at the combine doing stuff like that. So you saw some of that from Wallace. He had 5 assists in in each of those games. When you look at it per 36 minute numbers, his averages were nearly a triple-double, 13.5 points, 11.7 rebounds, 9 assists, nearly 2 steals. So that was good. He didn't shoot the ball well. He translates, he projects as a 3-and-D wing at the next level. That means you got to knock down some threes and take them. He only took 3 in his minutes, and he made 1, 33%, but he passed up some open looks because he's still not sure. And then he puts the ball in the deck and tries to drive and create. That's not his game. The defense, he was open for a reason. The defense is sitting back on him. So I think that was a little problematic. There's still some things when I watch him that make me think he's an undersized 4. I need to see more of a guy that looks like a 3-and-D wing. And that's taking those perimeter shots. Not, I think it's going to be problematic from him. I think he, as an undersized 3-4 combo and playing that undersized 4 on the college level worked. I don't know how much that works. I think that could be a little problematic and maybe affect his draftability. So you hope that going from combine to individual workouts with teams, meeting with teams, as he moves forward, if he stays in, he's only got a few more days to make that decision. If he stays in, that he gives teams more and more of a glimpse of that 3-and-D guy and not as much of that undersized 4. Because I think that makes him a difficult tweener, and may affect teams making a decision on whether or not to draft him. Because there's a lot of good things. Mention the measurables, man. That